Hi guys and girls on YouTube, and welcome to my channel. I've got this Samsung TV here. Now this isn't a repair video, it's a tip video, and it's one of them with a silly one connect box that connects to the TV through this single wire. Now the customer says the TV won't come on. In fact, it's difficult to see, but under there's a red light, and when you press a button on the remote control, the light on the front of the TV blinks a bit, but the screen doesn't actually light up. Now the biggest problem with anything like this is deciding whether it's this box or the TV. So we're not interested in the model of the TV. All we're going to be looking at is the model of this box, which is a Samsung One Connect SOC1001R. So how do we decide whether the fault's on this or it's on the TV? Let me give you this quick tip. So if you look at the specification of the box, it only gives two outputs, one at 13 volt and one at 350 volt, which will be for the backlights. Right, now as luck would have it, we've got a pin out here with all the different voltages. So the bottom one's ground, no connection, and then the next one up is a 350 volt rail. You can't see it on the camera because I'm not zoomed in very well, and then the other rail there is 13 volts. Let me just see if I can zoom in. Oh, you can see it better now there, look. So the 13 volt, we're going to assume that's there because there's a red light on the TV, but let's just measure it anyway. So there we go, we're switched on. You can see I'm probing in there. It says 13 volt. We've got 12.83. That's not that far off. Now the 350 volt rail is the first pin and the third one up. And as you can see, we don't have any 350 volts. Now that appears to indicate that there's a fault on this power supply. Now this whole power supply, this top board, is available as a spare part. It's not that expensive, it's less than £100, but the problem is it becomes expensive if you buy one of those and it doesn't cure the fault. So let me show you how to decide whether this is faulty or not. Now here's all the bit I've spent a long time on. I've found out that there's no 350 volt rail generated unless the power factor correction chip is running. Now I've found there's no supply at the PFC chip. That comes through a transistor that's generated by an auxiliary winding on a transformer into the collector of that transistor, and the base of that is controlled by an optocoupler. Now I've got the 20 volts here, but we don't have any supply here. So I trace the optocoupler back, and that comes from another transistor which is controlled by a line that says on or off. Now this line here appears to come from the main board in the TV itself. Now I've actually traced this line back, and it goes to a resistor, and then it goes to pin 3 on that connector, and it says on the connector PS on off. Or does it just say PS on? I think it says PS on, which I would imagine is power supply on. So when the main board supplies a low voltage here, that turns this transistor on, which activates the optocoupler, which applies the 20 volt to the PFC, and then the 350 volt rail should become active. So let's just take a look at pin 3 on the connector. Right, so let's get zoomed in here. That is it there. It goes, the order of the pins is slightly, it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, but you can see that it's 1 and 3, and it says there PS on. So what we need to do is we need to put a multimeter on there and on the ground and see what voltage we've got on PS on when we press the standby button on the remote control. Right, and the answer to that is we only have 0.265 volts. So 0.265 volt on the base of that transistor is not going to turn it on, so we won't activate the power factor correction, so we won't have a 350 volt rail. Right, so this is the tip. What we need to do is we need to get a voltage of more than 0.7 onto that pin and see what happens. See if the power supply turns on and generates a 350 volt rail or it doesn't. And I'll show you the easiest way to get a voltage onto that. So what we're going to do is we need a 2.2k resistor. Right, so take your 2.2k resistor, stick one into pin 3, which is power supply on, and stick the other end into pin 7, which is A13, the permanent 13 volt rail. And then if the 350 volt comes up between pin 15 and pin 19, you know that the fault is probably not on here. It's the set that's not providing the power supply on to switch on the power factor correction. So let's give that a try now. I've put the resistor in there. You can see you don't need to solder it on anything, just jam it into the 2 pins there like that. And let's get a meter connected across these and see what happens now. Right, so the power supply is plugged in the mains. If you look under the TV, we do have, it's very difficult to see, but we do have a standby light lit there. Let's just measure and see what we've got now on the pin 19 and 15. So there we go, and if you look at that, the 350 volt rail has now come up. So that pretty much confirms that the one connect box is not the problem. Right, let's take the remote for the TV and see what happens when we press the button on there. And there we go, the TV's come on. Now I presume if I pull this resistor out while it's on, the TV should go off like that. Right, so I've got this split in half now. I've had a look. It's not as straightforward as I thought. I'm in trouble here. I don't know what to do because the power on signal from here, I've actually traced it to this main board, and this little transistor here, the collector, that's sitting at 0.2 because there's 3.3 volts on the base of this transistor. Now if I ground the end of that transistor, if I ground the base of that transistor, the set will switch on. So something's telling the base of this transistor to switch the set off by taking it high. Now I've actually traced that. It actually goes to that test point there, and then it's a multi-layer board. It comes out there, and then it comes around this corner right down there, and the signal actually comes out of this microprocessor, which is connected to the one connect. So it looks like that control signal comes in on a data bus from the TV. I just assumed there'd be a pin on here which is toggled high or low, but it almost certainly looks like this is a data bus, and it's processed by this micro, which then tells the set to turn on by taking this base of this transistor low. So we're really stuffed now. I don't know whether it's this board here or it's the board in the set, but it's certainly not as straightforward as it seems. Now this board is available and it's not that expensive, but once again, it's expensive if it doesn't cure the fault and it turns out to be the board in the telly. So I really, and of course there's no service manual for this to tell you anything. I really don't know where we go from here, so I'm going to close the video now and think about this. But that's your problem. The on and off control comes out of this chip and it probably goes in on a data bus. It's not just a single on and off control down this one connect lead. So it's either on this board or it's on the TV board. I don't know which one. I'm going to come back to this. But anyway, there you go. Now, I'm sure somebody watching this video, so what about the lead? It might be the lead that's faulty. Well, you could just replace this lead, but this lead's about £70. The price of this lead is about the same price as this board. So let's think logically about this lead. I'll tell you what I think that will be a test to see if this lead is the problem or not. Right, so this is what I think. Whether this is right or wrong, I don't know. But this is my theory. So if you look in the One Connect box, we have a remote control sensor there. Now in the TV, there's also a remote control sensor, probably down there, but certainly along the bottom anyway. So if we cover up the TV and we point the remote control to this and it turns the set on, this is receiving the signal. It'll be sent down this wire to the TV, and I would imagine that the TV will send a signal back down this wire to turn this box on. So what we're going to do first, we're going to cover up the front of the TV, and we're just going to, I've got the resistor in there, and we're going to point the remote control just at that and see if that turns the telly on. And then what we'll do is we'll cover that up and we'll point at the telly and see what that does, if that makes sense, because that should tell us that there's communication up and down bi-directional on that wire. It's now plugged in the mains. I've covered the TV with a couple of boxes, and I've also got a jumper here over the infrared sensor. So let's take that, put that, where is it there, put that under there and press this button, see what happens. And there we go, the TV's come on. So we know that the One Connect box is sending a signal forwards to the TV, and I would imagine that the TV is sending back to the One Connect box. But let's just take all this off now. No, let's keep this covered up, and then we'll do the same test with the remote control on the front of the TV. So let's just turn this off. There we go, that's off. The TV's back in standby. You can see the infrared there. Let's cover all that up now, like that. And then we'll just point this at the front of the TV and see what happens. And there we go, the TV's come on. So I think we've got two-way communication down this One Connect lead. I don't think that is the problem. Well, that's my theory anyway. Right, so I think the sensible thing to do now is get a signal into here and just make sure everything comes up on the TV okay. I mean, it does look like when it's on it's working, but I'd rather check it with a proper signal first. But I've been thinking about this, and I've thought about something what the customer said. Now this set's, what's the date on there? Is it... I can't remember. I did see a date on it somewhere, and I think it's 5 or 6 years old. The customer said even though this is an old set, it's hardly been used. He said they have this in the best room, so I'm guessing that it's probably only used on a Saturday and perhaps a Sunday. So I'm thinking now, I wonder if this set's actually missed a software update if it's not been if it's not had an awful lot of use. But let's get a signal into it first, and I'll just run it for half an hour and make sure everything's okay, and then we'll decide what to do next. Right, so I've got a skybox set up. I'm just going to confirm it's all working by plugging into this little TV here. So there we go, we've got a Sky signal. Now I know everything's working. I'm going to unplug that and plug it into HDMI 1, which is what it said on the TV when it came on. And then let's turn the TV on, see what happens. Right, so TV's on. Last time it just changed to HDMI 1 on its own, didn't it? Ah, now look at that. We're on HDMI 1 and it says no signal. So it's not detecting either that there's a signal going into that HDMI, which makes it not just a power issue. It almost certainly seems more and more like a software problem. Now I have noticed in this box there's an EEPROM. I've also noticed that there's a space there with two contacts on and what appears to be a picture of the switch. I wonder if that's some sort of reset. Can you see it there? But I'm not going to short them out just for the minute. As we can get into the menu and everything on the TV, so I can change channel with the remote, I'm going to have a look and see if there's anywhere in the menu that's a factory reset, because I would imagine if you perform a factory reset on the TV, I would imagine it's also going to reset this EEPROM in the One Connect box. But that's my theory anyway. But we do have we can change things on the remote. Right, so I'm just going to stop the camera while I look for a menu somewhere on this TV. I just thought first I'll try HDMI 2, and I've changed the TV to HDMI 2, but it says exactly the same, no signal. Let's go back to 1 because that's how the customer brought it in, set to 1. HDMI 1, and I'll just swap that over and then I'll have a look through the menu for some sort of a reset. So that seems to be a sort of another clue. It's not just a power issue because it's not detecting any signal on the HDMIs. Right, so I'm in the settings now, and if we look down there is one that says reset. Now what's that going to do when we press this? Well, here we go. All the settings will return to the factory default. There's only one way to find out if this is going to do anything. Let's just press it. We've nothing to lose. Pin number. That's a good start. What's it going to be? 0000999912341111. I'm going to have to stop the camera while I mess around with this now. Right, well I've tried all the numbers I can think of. That doesn't work. But according to the internet, we need a remote control with some buttons on, and you press mute 824 power and that resets it to 0000. So I'm going to have a look around for a remote control with some buttons on now. I'll come back in a few minutes. Right, so I've reset the pin number now. It turns out you need this remote with some number buttons on. Anyway, that's done. So it's back to the factory default of 0000. Right, let's see what happens now. So, here we go. 0000. Right. If you proceed to reset, all settings will return back to factory default. We want to change that to yes. And then let's press this button and see what happens. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. TV's just switched off. don't know whether we just leave it for a few minutes now and try to turn it back on. I'll just stop the camera for a minute. Yeah, you just leave it. It comes back on its own when it's done. Well, that's reset. Let's see if we can get it reconfigured now and try it again, see what's happening. Right, well, I've done all that and it says your TV is ready to use. Right, let's see what happens now then. Right, so I've just swapped the HDMI to number 2 and it still doesn't work. Now I'm wondering if we need to power down the One Connect box and restart it. So let's try that next. But so far it's no different than it was before. Right, so I've just lifted the end of that resistor and the set will not come on again. So that reset has done absolutely nothing at all. We're just back to where we started from. Right, next plan of attack. Let's get the telly connected to the internet and see if there's any software updates available for it. Right, so that says it's connected to my Wi-Fi router. Now let's have a look through the menus again. Ah, right, now look at this. Software update. If we move across, current version 1406, new version 1500. So I wonder how many software updates that's missed. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm just stop the camera. I'm just going to take a photograph of them numbers and then I'll do the auto update and see what happens. Right. Let's just click on yes. Oh, press the wrong button. Hang on, let's put the camera down and do this. Right, accidentally pressed the wrong buttons. At last check for updates about 10 seconds ago. So let's just click on yes and see what happens now. Right, I'll just stop the camera because it's going to be 1 minute 17 seconds. Come back in a minute. Right, so the TV's come back on. I've just gone into the menu again, support for software, and if we look at that, the software is the current version. It's now up to date. Let's see if it works now. And guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. It's just like it was before. So all that time later, we're just back to where we were in the first place, back to square one. So now I'm thinking, this box, that, if we zoom in there, there's 2 spare contacts, can you see there, and there's a symbol of a switch. Whether that is some sort of reset, whether you just short that out to reset the EEPROM in here, but while I've been sitting here looking at it, I've just noticed something else. I'll lift it up carefully because this is on, and we've got 350 volts on 2 of these connections here, but what's that I see on the back between the HDMIs? There's a hole, and it's not a hole for a screw, and it does appear to have a button in. So I wonder, no screws on there, I wonder if that is a reset button, and that is probably the reset button that would have been inside. I wonder if it's on the outside. Let's just have a look if you can look down there. No, it's not very clear that, but that is definitely some sort of button in that hole that wants pressing. So I'm going to give that a press now and see what happens. Yeah, between HDMI 3 and HDMI 4. Right, let's try that next. Right, well, it didn't seem to press in that, so I've actually taken the board out so I can have a better look. and I don't know, it just appears to be an LED. Why would you have an LED stuck on the back with a hole in the back between two HDMIs? I have no idea. Let me see if I can zoom in and get you a better picture. Well, that's definitely not a button. So, I really don't know what to say now. I'm stuck. Right, so I've just tried shorting these out in case it is some sort of a reset, but as you can see, that has done nothing whatsoever. Right, so that message, oh, it's gone. A message just popped up on the screen, said the software has been updated. So I still don't know whether it's the main board in the TV or it's the main board in here, but I've just had another thought. If you look in here, we've got lots of power supply inductors, so we've got butt regulators, so we've got at least 1, 2, that looks like a power supply, 3, 4, 5, we've got at least 5 different supply rails in here. So I think the sensible thing to do is to check that we've got supply rails on all of these, because I did notice earlier on, quite earlier on, but I've tested them anyway, that there's 2 little sub-miniature fuses there about the size of a pinhead, but they were both okay. So that's the next plan, is to check all the outputs on these buck regulators, make sure we've got some sort of voltage there, see if that gives us any clue to what's happening. I can't see how it can be this though, because we've got the screen lit up, we've got menus and things coming on. So I can select all these different things, so I can't really see it being a supply rail, but let's check them next and come back in a bit. Right, now that's interesting. If we take that one there, the easiest place to, not the correct place to take the voltage measurement, but the easiest is on the inductor. And we've got 5 volt on there, 5 volt rail, that seems pretty okay. This one here, 3.3, that would seem right, but this one here, we don't have any voltage. And also there's another inductor there, that one there, we don't have any voltage on there either. So I wonder if it is something on this board, because we've got 2 rails up and we've got 2 rails not showing anything. Now I guess one of these might be for the USB. Have we got USB on here? No, we haven't got USB. So that's next to the processor. I wonder if that's something to do with the HDMI, but we definitely have not got any voltage on there or any voltage on that one. So I'm going to stop the camera while I have a close look at this now. I wonder if we're making some progress. I wonder if it's this board that's not working. Right, so we've got 2 out of 4 possible supplies aren't working. That's working, and that one's working, but this one behind the HDMI sockets next to the processor, that doesn't appear to be working, and that one there doesn't appear to be working. I wonder about these MLCC capacitors. I'm going to come back in a bit when I've checked them all. I've just noticed actually we do have USBs here, and they do have their own power supply chips, but unfortunately all these capacitors that were highly suspect are not faulty, but I have just noticed something here. I've not tested it yet. I'll just zoom in and show you. We've got no voltage on there, but the size of a pinhead there, there is another fuse there. You can see how small it is by the meter tip. So I'll just test that next. But it's looking more and more likely the fault is in this bit. Right, well, I'm still looking at this, but I've also noticed on that regulator there is another fuse the size of a pinhead. Unfortunately, this fuse and the one, where was it, down here, that one there, both them fuses are alright. But I wonder if that fuse and that fuse connect to a common power rail somewhere, because that there looks to be some sort of regulator. Anyway, I'm going to stop the camera and I'll keep looking, come back to you if I find anything. Yeah, if you look at that, them two fuses, they actually connect to each other, so them fuses are coming from a common rail somewhere. So all we need to do is trace the source of where the power source of where them fuses are coming from, and on a board like this, that is not going to be easy. Now, actually, we're getting confused here. The deeper and deeper I get into this, the more confused I'm getting. Them two fuses, these are actually the rails that are running. I've marked these. It's this one here that's not running, and this one here. So I guess we need to start looking around that chopper IC for an input. Yeah, this is the trouble. When you spend so much time on it, you get deeper and deeper in, you just get more and more confused. But anyway, we'll come back in a bit. I've not given up yet, let's put it that way. Right, now we might be on a red herring here with this this buck regulator, because there's a number on that and I've run it through the internet and it's a Texas Instruments switching regulator. And if we just go over to the internet, I'll show you. There we go, it's a TPS65235, which is an LMB voltage regulator chip. So that is actually powering the power up to the LMB through the F connector, so we can forget that one. The favourite one I need to concentrate on now is this one here, which seems to be powering something in this processor. Now I can't really identify that, but there's not many pins on there to see which one's the input and the output, but it does seem like this might be the favourite one. This might be just switched off because we're not on satellite input, but this here seems to be very close to the processor. In fact, I would imagine a lot of these things are actually going into that processor. So this is where we're going to concentrate. Why is there no output from this buck regulator? Right, so this regulator here, the thickest tracks go to the middle two pins. Now I don't know what that chip is, but the thickest tracks go to the middle, that side and that side. So you would imagine one is in and one is out. There's no power on either of them. And if we move over here, you've got a very large, it looks like a supply line decoupling capacitor connected to a very heavy track there that actually goes into the underneath of that IC. And if we measure on there, we don't have any voltage. So I think we're looking for why there's no power on this 6-pin chip here. Now what I have spotted, there's some little chips like that one there. I wonder if they're FET switches, because they have two very big tracks going to them, which you would imagine is an in and out, and some fine lines which are probably control lines, and there's another one there as well. But it does seem, oh, there's another one there, look. It does seem that this might be the source of the problem, because there's no power going into that chip. Whether I can find the source, it's not going to be easy, but I'll press on. Right, so absolutely ages later, I think that the input to this regulator is this capacitor here. Now, it's a multi-layer board. This could go absolutely anywhere. I've looked underneath. The underneath doesn't give any clues away, because it actually goes to I think it's, where was it here? Anyway, it doesn't really matter, because wherever it goes to you can't see, because it's multi-layer, it's inside the board. But ages and ages later, I found that the input actually comes from here. Now, if you look at that chip there, we've got two very thick tracks. One will be an input, one will be an output. So what we need to do is concentrate the search around that. But I've also noticed there's a couple of transistors there which could be switching that on and off. What we really need to know is what that chip is. But that's where it seems to come from there. Yeah, just as I thought, them two transistors will be switching that chip on and off. It's actually a dual MOSFET, and they will be gate drives. That's actually switching main power rails. Let's just have a look at the data sheet. Right, so that's the chip there, A048001A, and if you look at that, just a couple of MOSFETs. Right, let's centre attention around there now and see where we go from there. Right, so here we go, pin 1, which is an input there. That's actually got 5 volts going in, and pin 3 is another input to the other MOSFET. We've got 12 in there. So on these two outputs here, because they're joined together, we should have 12 on one and 5 on the other. And we've got nothing on there. And nothing on there either. So that means that these transistors are probably switching that MOSFET off. Right, so we're no further forwards really. I was right, these pair of transistors here operate the MOSFET gates, and the bases of these transistors, them two resistors, are joined together to a single point. In order to turn the MOSFET on, you need to pull down the collectors there, which means applying power to the base of that transistors in parallel. I mean, what I could do is I could just join these to ground and see what happens. I mean, I don't think we've anything to lose, because these are only on and off switches that just turn this on and off. But I thought we were looking for a missing power rail. It turns out the rails are actually switched off. I don't know if I can trace where that goes, because it's a multi-layer board. It could come from absolutely anywhere. I might just turn it over and have a quick look. But you can see there that both them bases are joined together to a single point. Right, well, very interesting, but both of these bases here actually go to this test point here, which I believe it says switched power delay. But that's just a test point, then it shoots off somewhere else down there. Let's have a look on the back. It actually goes there, and it comes down here and comes out there. It could go absolutely anywhere, that. Right, so switch power delay, from there it goes to them bases. I've managed to trace that now. It comes over to the centre of that resistor. Where I've made that red mark, it's that resistor there, but the other end of that resistor comes down here and into the BGA processor. So it's this that's not turning them other supplies on. So really, we're just back to where we were in the beginning. I have no idea whether this is the problem or it's the board in the telly. Right, so just for a quick test, I'm going to ground the collectors of these two transistors, which will take them down to 0, and that'll turn on that P channel FET, and the rails we're missing will come up, and then we'll see what happens next. There's nothing to lose. Well, I don't think there is, because it don't work anyway, does it? Right, so here we go. Let's have a look. So I'm going to just touch this on the tuner case here, and if you look at the meter, so touch that on the tuner case, it does bring up the missing 5-volt rail, and you take that off, it goes back, and if we go on there and we touch that on there, that brings up the missing 12-volt rail. Right, so we're then grounded the regulator for the LMB. That is running. That'd be the 13-volt rail for vertical, and this other buck regulator down here that had no output. If we measure that, hang on, the probes come off. Right, there we go. So we've got going in now, we have the missing rail, and coming out we have 0.96. I would imagine that is a 1-volt rail that's coming out of there, but that also seems to be alright. So even though we've got the missing rails, still nothing's happened. And I wouldn't be surprised if we pull this resistor off now, if the set goes off. Yeah, just like I thought. Right, so that's really all I can do. We're going to have to close this video now. I'm still not sure whether it's this box or not, this board, or it's a board in the TV. So, I mean, does anybody have more experience on these One Connect boxes than me? If you do, please leave it in the comments and give me some sort of a clue which way to go. Because I've come to the end of the road now. I've no more ideas. You know, that's it really. I've spent hours on this. I've done as much as I can, and I can't determine whether it's the TV part or the box part. So if you've done more of these and you're more experienced than I am, please leave it in the comments so I can have a look. Alright guys and girls on YouTube, many thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.